Hello again, lovely internet people, it's Kit the Goddess, back once again with another one of my Let's Talk About videos. Just one of my shorter videos when I didn't have time to make anything else, where I talk about whatever's on my mind in an unscripted format. And today, that happens to be Persona 3 Reload. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So, Persona 3 Reload, as I'm sure most of you already know, is a game that is a remake of Persona 3 that was announced back at Summer Games Fest about a month ago. I made a video talking about games I was excited for from Summer Games Fest, and this was right there, one of the top ones from the list, after it leaked like 3 days before it actually got announced. But, you know, I was super pumped for this game, and it looked like awesome. It looked awesome. It looked like they were really taking the opportunity to improve Persona 3 and make it stand on par with the newer entries in the series, particularly Persona 5 Royal, which, in my opinion, is the best game in the series at this point. But then as more interviews started coming out and more information started coming out about the game, as we started to learn more, there was just some really concerning things that were said about the game, and certain content that would or wouldn't be in the game. Certain changes they were willing to make and others they were not. And I just think that it warrants a discussion because at this point, Persona 3 Reload doesn't really look like it's going to be the definitive version of Persona 3 that people wanted, which really sucks. So the elephant in the room obviously is the fact that the answer and the female protagonist will not be included in this remake. Of course, the answer being the epilogue story introduced in Persona 3 FES, and the female protagonist being an entirely alternate route that brings the Persona 3 experience kind of closer to what it was, or closer to how Persona 4 is in terms of social links and gameplay and that sort of thing. And, you know, the fact that, both of these aren't going to be included really sucks because, of course, when Atlus put out their survey asking what games people wanted to see remade a couple years ago, they're like, of course, Persona 3 was one of the most requested ones. But here's the thing, the reason that it got so many people requesting for it to be remade is because there isn't really a definitive version of Persona 3 right now. I mean, yeah, you can go back and play FES, which has the animated cutscenes and the fully explorable 3D areas, and also has the answer, so you kind of get the complete story there, whether or not you like the answer. I haven't played it, but I've heard the story quality is kind of mid. Or you could play Persona 3 Portable, which, yes, is downgraded in some fashions. It's been converted to a visual novel, so it doesn't have any of the animated cutscenes. It doesn't have the fully explorable 3D areas, except for the dungeons in Tartarus, because it had to be downgraded for the PlayStation Portable. But then you have the FemC route, which is a completely new route, which changes a bunch of the social links, allows you to have a social link with all of your party members, and makes a lot of quality of life improvements that, in my opinion at least, make it the definitive way to experience Persona 3, because, even in, the original Persona 3 had some really iffy, social links that were just kind of iffy in terms of quality, in my opinion. I don't remember, I think, if I don't remember if his name is it Kenji? I think his name is Kenji. The dude who wants to get with his teacher, and it's really gross. And then also, Nozomi, who's just, fat stereotype the character, which, yeah, we don't support stereotyping here. But, the problem is that, one of the main reasons that people wanted Persona 3 remade in the first place was so that we could combine the best of both worlds. Take the answer, take the explorable intended version of Persona 3 with the animated cutscenes and the explorable 3D environments, fuse that with the quality of life improvements and the female protagonist route from Persona 3 Portable, fuse that into one game, and you essentially have a definitive version of Persona 3 right there. And Atlus completely missed the point of why people, at least one of the major reasons people wanted Persona 3 remade in the first place, was so that we could have a definitive version of Persona 3. But apparently the directors and the people working on this remake have claimed that they don't want to include that content because they wish to keep make it a pure Persona 3 experience. So they're drawing completely, from what they say, they're drawing mostly from the original PlayStation 2 release, which is completely inferior to both of the other versions because both of the other versions have so many quality of life improvements, and which I'm sure will in the game because, it's quality of life stuff. But Persona 3 FES made a bunch of story changes that not only improved the story but added additional context to the events of what happens and everything. And of course they've said they're going to include that, so they're lying through their teeth. Clearly they don't want to keep a pure Persona 3 original experience. They're just cutting the stuff that would take the longest for them to develop and the most effort, which really sucks because, I don't feel like this, as excited as I am for this game, and I'm still excited, don't get me wrong, I'm still probably going to play it on launch day, I'll probably have a blast with it, but it feels incomplete because Atlus just completely missed the point of why Persona 3 needed a remake. And then they have the gall to like say that, oh, we're drawing from the pure original Persona 3, when clearly they're taking stuff from the other versions of it too. And then it's like they're making a big deal out of, oh, look, or out of quote unquote improvements. Like, oh, look, you can control the party members now. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, you could also do that in Persona 3 Portable. That's not as big of an improvement as you think it is. And then, not to mention, there's like a lot more room for them to improve the game as it is. But like, they've already completely ignored it. Like I mentioned, Kenji and Nozomi, those social links suck. Like, frankly, those are some of the worst social links in the series. And they not very easily, but it wouldn't have been that hard for them to, oh, I don't know, try and adapt some of the female protagonist social links for like Junpei or Akihiko or Ken or any of the other characters who are far more important to the story and deserve those social links. Frankly, they could have used this as an opportunity to adapt those into the male protagonists route, but instead they're like, no, we're sticking with all the original social links, and we'll give you additional opportunities to hang out with Junpei and them. But the fact that they're not social links just like puts them on a like, I don't know, it just feels weird. It feels like maybe this is just me having played Persona 5 and then Persona 4 and then Persona 3. Maybe it's just me having played them in that order that makes me feel this way, but like it doesn't feel complete if I can't have a social link with all of the party members. And again, the female protagonist route fixed that, and then they just chose not to include it. And here's the worst part about all of this, is that I don't trust Atlus not to turn around and say, oh, wait a minute, you guys wanted the female protagonist in the answer? Here's this $30 DLC where you can add it onto the game. And now you can play as the female protagonist, because we all know how Atlus and Sega are with their DLC practices recently, especially Atlus, because, I mean, Persona 5 had $60 worth of costume DLC. That's $60 worth of cosmetics. That is as much as the game costed at launch as DLC. And then when they re-released the game as Royal 2 years later with no upgrade path, so you had to pay full price. If you bought Persona 5 at launch, you then had to go and buy Persona 5 Royal again for $60 full price at launch. And it had not, which was the nice thing was it had all the costume DLC included, and the costume and personas. I forgot to mention there's a bunch of like exclusive personas, like the protagonist personas from the past few games and that sort of thing. And then they had the gall to make $60 worth of DLC. Well, it's not even worth $60, but they had the gall to make more costume DLC just for Royal, and more personas and like a challenge mode. And the challenge mode's nice, but like this is stuff that very easily could have been put in the base game with minimal effort. But they decided to instead make it DLC because they know people will pay for it, and then they charge as much as the entire game in itself, the 120-hour game, to get this DLC, which is ridiculous. And then of course they turn around and port the game to all the other systems just not even 3 years later, and then of course they include all that DLC. It's like Atlus clearly knows what they're doing, and they just don't care. They know that they can take advantage of people, and I don't trust them with Persona 3 Portable not to turn around and say, oh yeah, here's the answer, and here's the female protagonist for extra DLC dollars, gimme. Or even worse, I'm sure they'll, which probably honestly, I hate to say it, but it's probably what they'll end up actually doing, is re-release Persona 3 Reload like 2 or 3 years later down the line, and say, oh, here's Persona 3 Reload, but it's the complete edition, and it has the female protagonist in the answer and a bunch of other quality of life improvements that weren't in the original version. It's like, are you kidding me? Because that's exactly what they did with Persona 5 Royal. Like, Persona 3 to Persona 3 Fest, that made sense. They wanted to add some additional content to Persona 3, and this was in an age when DLC didn't exist. So yeah, re-releasing the game, that made sense. Persona 3 to Persona 3 Fest to Persona 3 Portable, yeah, they wanted to put Persona 3 on a portable console. Naturally, they had to cut some stuff, but they added the female protagonist to compensate for that. Sure, that makes sense for a re-release because you're putting it on a console it wasn't originally on. Persona 4 to Persona 4 Golden, sure, they're putting it on the PS Vita. That's a console the game wasn't originally on. That makes sense. Persona 5 to Persona 5 Royal has no excuse because it's Persona 5 releasing in 2017, and then 2 years later, they re-released Persona 5 with a bunch of quality of life improvements that very easily could have been added through, updates to the game. But they re-released the entire game for full price and offered no upgrade path or DLC or any or DLC upgrade or anything to people who already own Persona 5. And I don't trust Atlus not to pull that same shtick again with Persona 3 Reload. But that's enough negativity for me. I am still excited from the game. It still looks like a fantastic, high-quality remake. I mean, I know Atlus has a good team behind them. Hopefully they'll take this as an opportunity to erase some of the very large issues the original Persona 3 had with sexism and transphobia and all that crap, because the director is an awful, awful person. But yeah, all that said, thank you all for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. You know how it goes. I'll be heading home from camp I've been in like less than a week when this video goes up, so hopefully next week, first off, you won't have echo in my stupid audio, and then secondly, you'll actually have a longer, more scripted video that's more structured from me to entertain yourselves. So you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.